William Barth is known around the world as a keynote speaker, business consultant, and transformation expert. This success comes from being a product of a methodology that he created, the anatomy of transformation. His story not only inspires, it educates and empowers the audience to take immediate action. The system he will be sharing with you today has been proven over 26 years to get results as dramatic as a 93% growth in revenue in 12 months for one client and helping another to become in the top 10 fastest growing companies in New Jersey in 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome William Barth.
Thank you, Fred. My pleasure, sir. Thank you.
Some strong arms.
I hope so. It's got a little bit of the upper body strength going on from the crutches. How's everybody doing this morning? Great. Awesome. Good morning. I'm actually going to interrupt your food just for a moment because I like to start the presentation off with kind of a little bit of a shocker. And I'll need you to physically be involved to do this. We're not going to be doing jumping jacks or anything, just to let you know, although I could if you need to. But how many people have heard the adage that your physiology is completely tied to your psychology? Nobody? One person? Two? Okay, cool. Because you learn a lot about yourself, you learn a lot about other people in the way that people use their bodies. And I was just talking to one of the other gentlemen earlier where we were saying, the business starts in here. It starts with our personality first. I found that businesses are a mirror of the personality of the person who runs them or the C-level executives. So if I have your permission, we're just going to take about 2 minutes to do something physical. So I'll be interrupting your breakfast for a moment. But from this, you'll learn a lot about yourself. You'll learn a lot about the people around you, and then you can use it with people in your organization to learn about them. Sound like a plan? Yes. Okay, so I need everybody to stand up for a second. And let's see, where can I stand that people will see? All right, so what I need you to do is I need you to put your feet about shoulder width apart. If I can do this, everybody can. Sometimes that joke works. Sometimes people are like, we don't know what to do here. Okay, take your hands, put them about 12 inches apart. And what we're going to do in a moment is together as a team, we're going to clap our hands, okay? And this just is going to be a little bit of an alignment, shows how quickly the unconscious adjusts to things. But on the count of 3, together as a team, we're going to clap our hands. 1, 2, 3. And as usual, a little bit of machine gun fire going on. Okay, now we're going to do it again. 1, 2, 3. Notice how quickly the unconscious picks up things and adapts. So now that you've synced with this, I can change the pace at which I count off, and you'll still remain in sync. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So really quick point that the unconscious learns in a heartbeat. Many times we say that change takes time. Not really. It's the execution of the change. So when I first started doing consulting, coaching, those types of things about 18 years ago, there was $1 million spent on the research I'm about ready to share with you. So this time when you clap your hands, I want you to leave them however they fall, and we're going to take a look at the placement of your thumbs. This is what tells you about the personality. So on the count of 3, you're going to leave your hands as they fall, and we'll look at your thumbs. 1, 2, 3. Now, some people have what's called right thumb dominant. Your right thumb is crossed over your left. It could be a lot, it could be just a little bit. Those who are right thumb dominant, raise your hands, please. Okay, take a look around the room. Research shows that these are the intellectuals in the group. I didn't do the research, I only paid for it, okay? These are the thinkers in the group. Next group is left thumb dominant. Your left thumb is over your right, either a lot or a little. Left thumb dominance, raise your hands, please. Okay, a little bit, up, keep your hands up. Everybody take a look around. Okay, research shows that these are the sexy people in the group. People who liked the research in the beginning don't like it now, and the others do. Now our third group has their thumbs side by side. Okay, anybody who has their thumbs side by side, raise your hands, please. All right, great. I'll tell you what, everybody else sit down. You guys keep standing. So everybody take a look at the people who are still standing. Take a very good look at these people and avoid them at all costs because these people just think that they're sexy. Give them a round of applause. Thank you for staying. As with Fred, I like to open things up with a little bit of humor, a little bit of playfulness. Thank you for playing along. The first part of the research about the human mind and how quickly it picks things up and adapts is true. Change happens in a heartbeat. Transformation happens over time. There's a saying that change is inevitable, growth is optional, and transformation is a choice. So, as Fred mentioned, the topic I'm going to be speaking about today is a methodology, a framework that I created over the past now 27 years. When I sent that to Fred earlier this year, I had not celebrated the 27th anniversary yet, but 27 years of applying it in my personal life to make transformation, but also using it with my clients. So to give you a little bit of contrast, I've been doing business consulting and coaching for 18 years. As he mentioned in my intro, there is one company that we did 93% growth in 1 year. It was a photographer in a photographer's studio that we were working with. Another company still working with. We've been working with them for 3 years now. We just signed a contract for another 3-year period with them. They were in business for 30 years before we started working with them. And at the time, they had 15 employees. They were doing $32 million annually. And in 18 months, we took them from 15 employees to over 60. We took them from $32 million in revenue to 124 in revenue. And we took them to being the 9th fastest growing company in New Jersey and one of the top 2,000 fastest companies growing in the country. And last year, I had the honor of being invited to place a bid on a $2.5 billion real estate development project in New Jersey. Now, I don't tell you that to impress you. I'm sharing that because when I go to the contrast point, hopefully it will show you that this anatomy of transformation I'm talking about isn't just theory. It's something that I use to turn my life around, and it's something I use with businesses every day. I did not start out with a childhood dream of being a business consultant or a coach. I had no idea of what they were. A little bit of history. Curious of which part to start off with, and just kind of go with what the Spirit moves me to say. My father did not show up for the wedding. He left my mother at the Justice of the Peace, and later on told her that he never intended on showing up. Now, this was 1965 in a part of Pennsylvania where illegitimate children were not really looked on very favorably, or the mothers of those illegitimate children. So I grew up with a little bit of the black sheep syndrome. And to make matters worse, at the age of 8, I lost my left leg to bone cancer. And that's put me on 2 very distinct and different paths. One, I became a mega achiever. Anything that people told me I couldn't do, I had to set out and prove to them that I could. So I started making a living as a musician at the age of 15. I became the first licensed amputee motorcyclist in Pennsylvania. I lettered in junior high school wrestling without a leg. I lettered in high school football without a leg. And I had my first business by the time I was 19 years old. So to the external world, I looked like the prime example of how you overcome cancer in 1973. Inside, though, I was a basket case. You know, you take the meaning that I attached to growing up without a father and feeling odd, feeling awkward, throw on top of that the loss of the leg at 8 years old, and the 8-year-old's perception of, what did I do that was so wrong that I'm being punished? And I ended up attaching a meaning that I was evil, I was a son of Satan, and I was a monster. So I had very low self-esteem. I had just all this anger that was associated. And at the age of 13, add a little bit more here, I had been in the hospital 13 times, had 9 operations. So I was like an accident waiting to happen. Age of 13, something else happened, was I found the wonderful and amazing world of drugs and alcohol. So the same way that I overachieved in everything else, I took drugs and alcohol as heavily and as far as I could go. So 19 years old, had my first business. 20 years old, I was facing 5 years in jail. And I did a total of 12 months between jails, halfway houses, and rehabs from the age of 22 to 23. So I woke up 24 years old, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially destroyed. I have 40 bucks to my name and nowhere to go. And I had that aha moment that, you know, this was not the life I dreamed of having when I was a child. You know, I had wanted to be a musician, wanted to be a singer, wanted to be famous, all those things. And here I was, no one would trust me. You know, I talk about being invited to put in a bid on a $2.5 billion project. 27 years ago, people wouldn't trust me with $20 because they knew they wouldn't get it back. And I hated who I was, I hated what my life was, and I decided that morning that I needed to do something to turn things around. So I immersed myself in a process that I now label as the anatomy of transformation. And it's what I use with businesses. This framework, this methodology, as I explain these 7 phases of transformation, I want all of you to think back to the start of your business or something that you mastered in your life right now that you excel at. Because at some point you've gone through every one of these 7 phases, and I will challenge you at some point to push back and tell me if you haven't gone through these phases in this order. Because with working with some of the most amazing business people and experts in the industry, I actually just got back from San Jose where I was working with Tony Robbins, and we put on an event for 10,000 people at the San Jose SAP Center. No matter who I've worked with and I've talked with them, every human being goes through these 7 phases of transformation, whether it's in their personal life or in their professional life. I will talk about how we applied this with the company that we took from the 32 million to the 124 million, because they had been in business for 30 years when we started working with them. Transformation happens at any point, okay? So let's talk quickly about the first phase of transformation, going from where you are to where you want to be. Phase 1 is what I call ignorance. Ignorance, phase 1. Now, ignorance is not a bad word. I mean, when I first started talking to my colleagues about using this as part of the framework, they were saying, you know, who is going to want to admit to ignorance? We have this really negative association of the word, but when you look in the dictionary, ignorance is just the state of being, of lacking knowledge, a state of not knowing. So I'm going to guess, unless you came up in a household and a family where one of your parents was a business owner, there was a point in your life where you were ignorant of the idea of owning a business. You know, I grew up in a community where my mother was a nurse. Most of my uncles were involved in the construction industry or factory industry. And I grew up with the belief that factory workers' kids became factory workers, doctors' kids became doctors, lawyers' kids became lawyers. That was just my understanding. I never knew or was aware that we had the ability to make a choice and move in the direction of what we wanted on our own until I read a book called Think and Grow Rich and was introduced to a sales manager who told me the only way I was ever going to have financial freedom or be able to design the life I desired was either through becoming an amazing salesperson or owning my own business. I was ignorant of the concept that I could start a business. I thought that was some magical place. If you go back in your past, let's say that you excel at golf or at a beautiful country club, or maybe you're a phenomenal artist, or maybe you're phenomenal with numbers. I'm going to guess at some point in your past, you had no real idea that this skill that you are so phenomenal at now even existed. And you may have to go back to when you were a child to where you're at that space of ignorance, but ignorance is phase 1. We start out where we don't know what we don't know. Does that make sense? Okay. Phase 2 in the anatomy of transformation is what we call awareness. At some point, something happens. Either we are moved forward by pain. Example, with the drinking and the drugs and everything, I had enough pain happen in my life that actually said, you know what, time for a wake-up call. You need to do something different. It's not working. So I had the pain that kicked me forward, made me aware that I needed to change. Or sometimes it's that conversation you have with somebody that introduces you to something new, introduces you to a new possibility, and you become aware. Now, the interesting thing about awareness is awareness does not guarantee transformation. Many people use awareness as an excuse. They say, well, I can't because, okay? Give you an example. Can't tell you how many business owners I've run into that they are struggling with their companies. Times change, the economy changes, technology changes. They are ignorant of how to adjust and ignorant of why their business is struggling. They become aware because the numbers start dropping. They become aware because their product is not moving as well. But then they get caught and controlled by two things: fear of the unknown, fear of the ability to transform and grow, or they have a limiting belief. I can't because fill in the blank. I can't because I'm too young. I can't because I'm too old. I can't because this is how we've done business for 30 years and this is what we do and this is how we've positioned ourselves. I can't because fill in the blank. And the awareness, although it's there and their business is being driven into the ground, they don't make the change. They use the awareness as an excuse. They use it as their story. Awareness only leads to transformation when you go to phase 3, which is taking responsibility. Taking responsibility. Now again, this framework overlays your business, it overlays departments within your business, and it overlays in your personal life. What strategies do you plug into this framework to be able to get you from where you are to where you want to be? Now, taking responsibility is actually twofold. How many of you, by show of hands, have some areas of your business, of your life, or in your life that you're not happy with, by show of hands? Okay, thank you for being honest about that. And how many of you are very happy with some areas of your business or of your personal life? Raise your hands. Awesome. First step in transformation that you actually take. The ignorance and awareness is in the psychology, but the first step that you actually take in transforming is taking responsibility, number one, for where you are. If you're not happy with where you are in your business, own it. The reason you are where you are is because of the decisions you've made and the actions you've taken. If you're not happy with your, with your sales numbers, if you're not happy with your corporate structure, if you're not happy with your business processes, if you're not happy with how things are going, take responsibility. It's nobody else's fault but yours. Because when you take responsibility that you are the one who made the decisions and took the actions to get you to that place, now you're empowered to take responsibility for where it is that you want to go. Does that make sense? Okay? So many times we want to blame it on a former employee, a former partner, the economy, different things that are going on. I'll tie this back to personal life. I had to take responsibility for the loss of my leg. And people will go, well, what control did you have? You had cancer. You're 8 years old. What responsibility could you take in regards to losing your leg? I had no ability to control the circumstances, but I have 100% control to take responsibility for how I reacted and how I responded. I could have chosen different actions to move me forward rather than going into anger, fear, pity, all these other things. It was a natural default to go to those places. And this happens for a lot of us. We end up having a circumstance happen. We've got the greatest business model working in the world, and all of a sudden we have a competitor comes out that refines and moves one thing, and all of a sudden they're kicking our butts, and we get angry about it, and we go into the awareness that our butts are getting kicked, and then we go into the poor me's that I wish I would have thought of that sooner, or they infringed on my intellectual property, they did these different things, and we stay in the awareness. We don't take responsibility to go, you know what? I should have learned from that. I should have done a better job of protecting my intellectual property. I should have done a better job of staying on the cutting edge of what was happening in my industry. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about saying, I own it. I'm here because of the choices I made, the decisions I made, the actions I took. Now, the other side of that is you also need to take responsibility for the wins in your life. Many times we bust our tails to get to where we are, and then when we get there, we go, no big deal. Give yourself credit. You busted your tail to get to where you are. You're the one who made the choices. You're the one who took the risks. You're the one who put the actions in to get to the place that you're at, of those places you're proud of. And when you take responsibility for that and acknowledge that you are a genius, that you are a person who thinks ahead of the curve, that you are somebody who has persistence and fortitude to be able to overcome any obstacle that comes up, you wouldn't be sitting in this room right now if you didn't have amazing skills and a superior level of commitment. I say that with 100% certainty. You would not be sitting in this room if you didn't have those gifts. So give yourself credit for it, because that also allows you to grow to where it is that you desire to be. Does that make sense? Take responsibility, phase number 3. Phase number 4 is what I call immersion. Immersion. We're talking about transformation. You get to that point where you're saying, you know what? The only thing that's going to save my company, the only thing that's going to grow my company, the only thing that's going to create the legacy that I desire to create is me. So the next place that people struggle and fail at is when it comes to this phase 4 of immersion. Probably not people in this room, but let me ask just out of curiosity. How many people here, let's take it to personal life, how many of you have tried to quit smoking in the past? By show of hands. Nobody? Okay, 1, 2. How many people have tried to lose weight? By a show of hands. Okay. Again, being in a room of CEOs and winners, I'm thinking there's not a lot of people who have done these. How many of you have tried to grow your business? Okay. Can I borrow you just because we had a conversation earlier and I feel okay, we got the rapport? So it was James. James, come on up, please. Let me see, what do I have here? This is not a trick. We did not rehearse this earlier. So what I'd like you to do is I would like you to try to take the Altoid container out of my hand. Okay, that was a great job of knocking it out of my hand.
I thought you were going to
Thank you. Okay. That was a great job. Not what I asked you to do. So please listen closely to the instructions.
Okay.
Try to take the Altoid can out of my hand. Okay, it's a great job of leaving it in my hand, but it's not what I asked you to do. Okay, great job of taking it out of my hand, but it's not what I asked you to do. One more time. Try to take the Altoid can out of my hand. Great job of still leaving it in my hand.
Right.
Okay. Now, in all fairness to James, I have done this for 15 minutes with people on stage sometimes, and they don't get the little nuance here. Let me ask you a question. If you asked me to come and help you move your office on Saturday, I said, yeah, I'll try. Do you think I'm showing up? Absolutely not. Thank you for coming up and participating here. I'm going to give the whole opening, or not the whole opening, but the aha moment to this. In life, there is no such thing as try. You either do something or you don't. If you say you're going to try to improve your sales, don't even start because you are not committed to it. If you say you're going to try to open up a new division, don't even start because you're not going to do it. You're giving yourself an excuse to fail. Transformation begins when you take responsibility and then you commit yourself so deeply that there is no other outcome than achieving the outcome you're committed to. When people say you're going to try, all you're doing is you're giving yourself the excuse to fail. So phase 4 of transformation is immersion. How committed are you to the process? Are you committed to where you're willing to risk everything to make it happen? Are you committed to know that there is no other option than success in making it happen? Okay? When you get to phase 4 of immersion, the next step is what we call interdependence. And then I'm going to take a little break from the phases and tie this together with the story of the company that went from 32 million to 124 million. Phase 5 is what's called interdependence. In life, there's 2 ways that we can learn things. One is through the school of trial and error, which we also call the school of hard knocks. How many people have attended? By a show of hands. How many people have their PhDs? Okay, awesome. School of trial and error, school of hard knocks. The other school of how you learn things is through the school of OPE, other people's experience. Okay? It's about finding mentors, about finding people who've already walked the path. It's about finding reading books, going to events, having gatherings like this where you're picking the brains of people who have already gone out and made the mistakes, learned from those mistakes so you don't have to make them. You know, let's talk openly about it. What does the school of trial and error cost us? What's the school? Time, okay, money, okay, what else? Failures, energy. Many times it costs us our dreams. Whether that dream is, a sales goal that we have, whether that dream is to create a company that turns into a legacy type of company, whether it's about becoming a business owner rather than a business operator. Because in the school of trial and error, where we keep beating our heads against the wall, and it costs us time, and it costs us energy, and it costs us money, many times we finally get to the point where we submit and go, you know what, I just can't do this. I knew I didn't have it in me. We have all these reinforcements of limiting belief systems or fears of failing, fear of getting hurt, that we end up giving up on our dream and walking away from what our possibilities were. Now again, you've already overcome many of those to be where you're at now. This is just about being aware of the process that you've gone through. Interdependence is where I come to you and I say, here's the things I'm working on right now. Here's the struggle I'm having. What did you do to overcome these things? It's not codependence of, take me by the hand and lead me and I'm just going to make sure that all my success falls on you. It's about picking your brain and 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 bringing into me those skills so I can apply them to move them forward, but I also contribute back to you. So that's where the interdependence part is. So I said I was going to step away from the steps for a moment. There are two more phases, but I want to give a little bit of a tying together how this works. The company I was mentioning that we took from the 15 employees, now they're actually at 80 as we're reaching the 3-year point with them. But it was 18 months that we hit that benchmark of 63 employees and they went to 124 million. When we first met the CEO of that company, he was living the life of his dreams. Family business, 30 years, his father built a lot of it, passed it off to him. He continued to build it to where they were making 30 million a year in revenue. He decided to move to Italy because he wanted to raise his kids and have them go to school in Europe. He was living the life of his dreams. Money for him was great, family life was great. He had put strong managers in position, so the company was running without him being there. He would come back to the US once a year to meet with them, see what was going on. Well, he came back for one of those annual meetings one time and found out that he was ready to lose 3 of his top managers. Why? Everything was going great. They were making good money, company's going well. How many of you that are sitting in this room like to be challenged? By a show of hands. You have to grow. You have to be doing new things. I mean, if you were doing the same thing every day, it'd be boring, and you'd look for somewhere else to go, something else to do. It was the same thing for them. They needed to be challenged, and they were open enough with them to say, hey, Greg, we got to do something. We got to find something that utilizes the skills and the talents that we have. Well, he became aware. He went from ignorance of thinking everything was going well to awareness that there were some potential problems here. So he had to look at everything and he had to take responsibility, not in a bad sense of things, but just going, the company is where it is because of my plan to get it to this point. I took care of me, I took care of my family, I took care of establishing what I wanted, but I forgot to be asking my people what they wanted, and I forgot to see if we were working for everybody's best interest in this. Then he also had to ask himself the question, am I willing to grow the company, because that means it's going to disrupt this lifestyle that I've developed. It means I may have to move back from Italy. It means I may have to do things differently. And he took responsibility. Next part was, how committed was he going to be to making this transformation happen? And again, it wasn't something he was going to try. He knew that a lot of things were at stake. The 30-year-old company, the friendships. I mean, some of these people on his management team have been with him since he began. His father built it for years, but they were with him for a decade or more. So he had to immerse himself in his level of commitment to take the company to where they wanted it to go. And when we sat down to talk with them, they wanted to grow the company. Their plan was a 3-year plan to grow the company to 95 million, a 3-year plan. And they knew that would mean going from 15 employees to about 75 was what we mapped out of what they need to hit that growth and maintain it. And when he decided that he was committed to the growth, then he had to become interdependent. He brought our team on. We have 12 consultants of part of our team that are working with him, but we're not the only people he became interdependent with. He's a part of another organization similar to CEO Club, and he started recognizing he had to reach out to the owners who are making the $100 million a year versus hanging out with the friends who are making the 25 to 30. Because the only way he was going to learn how to run a $100 million company was to talk to the people who are already doing it, learn from them. What were the things that they put in place? What were the obstacles they had to overcome? How did they set up their business processes? And through his becoming interdependent, Then they began really working on integrating the business processes, making the shifts, the policies, the procedures, and they started applying the anatomy of transformation with every employee and every department. Because as I mentioned, we had to look at their business process maps. You know, the business processes, the policies, the procedures, the systems that you use for a 15-person company at 32 million is much different than you're going to use for a 70-person company at 95 million. So we had to take every part of the company through these phases. The anatomy of transformation is not you do it one time and it's over. It's wash, rinse, and repeat. And many times it's going on simultaneously in different parts of your life, different parts of your business. Does this make sense? Okay? So as they started working on these things, amazing things started to happen. You know, the places they used to struggle in business because they were trying to do it their own way, they were going to school of trial and error in regards to their processes. They worked with subcontractors and the way that they did some of their internal handoffs between architecture, estimating, sales, project managers, supervisors, all these different things, started refining those. You know, again, it was going through the taking responsibility, the immersion, the interdependence, every department, and the company started to explode. 18 months, they went from 32 million in their normal practice to 64 million. They doubled it. And because they took on a larger group and a larger number of employees, there had been a client of theirs that had been asking them for years to build a project in Manhattan. And what they do is they build car dealerships. That's one of their main functions. But now they also build hotels, apartment buildings, but they were well known in the industry for building car dealerships. And they had a client for years, wanted them to build this multi-story building in downtown New York City. And the owner always had to say, no, I don't have the people to be able to do it. But because they were ramping up, they were finally able to say yes to this guy. And that one deal brought them in $60 million. Which is how they went to 124 million in 18 months. So phase 1, ignorance. Phase 2, awareness. Phase 3, taking responsibility. Phase 4, immersion. Phase 5, interdependence, which leads to phase 6, which is ownership. When I take from everybody that's sitting in this room, and I don't just take in a greedy way, I take where I'm feeding back, I'm contributing, but I take the lessons from everybody at this table, and the lessons from everybody at this table, and the lessons from everybody here, around, all of a sudden, it becomes a part of my DNA. You know, that thing that I knew nothing about, that thing of not knowing how to actually put a sales process map together. I can't tell you how many companies I work with that have no idea of what the process they do for sales is. They just do it shotgun and hope that they're doing things. But when I go from that state of ignorance of not knowing what the steps are sequentially in that sales process map, and I learn how to tweak them and make them better, increase them by 2% here, 3% here, 5% here, which ultimately leads to an exponential growth in my sales numbers. There comes a place to where I own it. I don't even have to think about it anymore. It's a part of my business's operating system, and it's a part of my DNA, where I can sit down and have a conversation with another CEO, and when they're struggling with something, in a matter of 3 or 4 sentences, I can zero in on where some of their problems are, meaning you can. You get to that place of that thing that you knew nothing about 6 months ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, becomes something that you're an expert in. You now own it. The same way that many of you own your industry that you're in. You are the experts and the educators in your industry, but you didn't start there. And when you own it, you go from phase 6 automatically to phase 7, which is what I call influence. Doesn't mean that you have to stand in front of a room full of people and teach. Doesn't mean you have to write books or create seminars or do anything like that. It means that now that you have achieved that level of success, whether you are consciously mentoring somebody, whether you are consciously teaching somebody, you are influencing everybody around you. You are influencing everybody in your company. People see that you've succeeded. People see that you've transformed. People see that your business has grown, and you give them permission to do the same. Because they may have been sitting there thinking, who am I to be able to build a company? Who am I to be able to lead a team? Who am I to be able to change an industry? Who am I to be able to be such a powerful thought leader? Because most people, all of their lives, have been taught to think small. We've been taught to play the victim. We've been taught that we're not good enough and that we can't succeed. It's always the other guy. We look at a Steve Jobs and go, he was a genius, he was gifted. Yes, he was. But he also took ownership of it and said, I am going to be able to do these things. I want to make them happen. He went through the anatomy of transformation. He went through those phases. You know, we look at all these business leaders and many times think that they got touched with some magic wand or some gift that made them phenomenal leaders and made their business phenomenal. No, they stuck it out. They went through the trenches. They went through the ups and downs, just like every one of you have to this point. They just decided that their outcome, their end game, was going to be a little bit higher than yours. Now, it doesn't mean yours can't get that high also. And when you get to that point and succeed, you're influencing your children, you're influencing your neighbors, you're influencing your family, and letting them know that there's nothing that can prevent them from achieving what they want either. So real quickly, again, the anatomy of transformation, phase one is ignorance. We all start where we don't know what we don't know. You know, there was some point in your life that you didn't know how to walk. But you saw other people doing it, and your parents encouraged you, and you got up, and you fell down. How many people here, when you got up the first time, stormed across the room? Didn't think so. You fell down, you made mistakes, and you learned. Okay? You became aware that there was another way to move yourself from here to the other side of the room than crawling or being carried. You became aware at some point that rather than working for someone else and having them put a rubber stamp on your forehead that says, no matter how hard you work, here's what I'm paying you, you said, BS, belief system, I'm worth more than that. And I'm going to determine my value. I'm going to determine my outcome. I'm going to determine my future. You became aware there was a possibility, and then you took responsibility. You went against what, I'm going to guess, this is just my hallucination, but there's not many business owners that I know who have not had pushback from friends and family going, are you crazy? What are you working all these hours for? Go get a real job. Go get something where there's security, where there's safety, where you're going to get that paycheck. But you took responsibility and said, I don't like my life the way it is. I'm going to create something. There's a mission here that's more powerful than I am. There's something that's more powerful than just the paycheck. I can't tell you how many times my family, they didn't come to me. I guess they were scared of me because of all the stuff that I was doing when I was younger. But they would go to my mother and tell her how I needed to get a real job, do all these things, go back to college, do all these other things. And it's not the money that drives what I do. I just came from San Jose where we had 10,000 people at an event who came there because they wanted to improve their business and wanted to improve their life. And over the past 18 years, I've been involved in probably doing that with about 250,000 people. And there is no feeling like the feeling I get at the end of one of those events when you see people who showed up on Thursday scared and not knowing where they were going, coming out of there focused, excited, and having a plan for where they want to go. It's about the passion. And I'm going to presume most entrepreneurs that I've met, most business owners I met, started the business not because they were going, I'm going to make $1 billion. They did it because they were passionate about a need in their community and something they wanted to provide to make a difference. That's been my hallucination. I could be wrong, there's no 100% personality profile that fits. But my belief is that most people who are willing to risk and work the hours that all of you work are doing it because you want to make a difference. You want to make an impact. So taking that responsibility, immersing yourself in that commitment, becoming interdependent. I don't think there's one person sitting in this room who got where you are by doing it on your own. I know the first time somebody asked me, they said, well, how did you overcome all those things? How did you overcome the drugs, the alcohol, the jail? One point I was $250,000 in debt. I've been homeless 4 times in my life. And people were like, well, how'd you overcome that? And the first time I answered said, well, it was about taking responsibility and tapping into my inner strength. What a cocky, egotistical, arrogant thing to say. The only way that I overcame any of those things, the only way that I got to where I am now and continue to go is by sitting down and having coffee with people like yourselves and having you teach me how to overcome some of these things, how to grow. I've had business partners embezzle money. I've had projects that I put hundreds of thousands of dollars into, and the data that went into beta test, actually 2 weeks after it went into beta test, Microsoft decides to release Vista as their operating system. Everything that went into that software development program went south. You know, Vista just tore the whole thing apart. I've had my failures, like just all of you have. And it was because of being able to sit down and talk to people like yourselves, I was able to pick myself back up and move past those things. So the interdependence is important. Ownership, again, it's just really that part of getting into that place where you don't question yourself anymore. Yeah, you can question and grow, but you don't question yourself. You've gone through the trenches, you've gone through the battles, you've made it to that point where this is a part of your DNA, and then you're automatically inspiring and influencing the people around you. So my time in my section here is running out. I just real quickly, any questions about the 7 phases that I've shared with you? Yes? Phase 7 is influence.
Influence.
Yes, phase 7 is influence. In our lives, we are constantly influencing people, whether we realize it or not. Question is, are we going to be a good influence or are we going to be a bad influence? But when you go through the transformation this way and you take that ownership, you now truly are inspiring people for them to step into their own greatness. Any other questions? Fred's got the mic if you do. Behind you, Fred.
Yeah, what's step 1 from here?
Step 1 from here? That depends on where you are in your own transformation. So when I share this, I ask people to pick an area that you're looking to transform, whether it's in you and your business, and then ask, what phase am I in right now? Am I just coming out of ignorance into awareness? Am I at that point of taking responsibility, but I haven't fully immersed myself yet? Because when you get to the chunk of where you are of those 7 phases, then you can start looking at what you need to go from the phase you're at to the next phase. And I'll tell you, there's only 2 things that prevent people from moving from any one of the phases to the next. It's fear. Again, our business, although it's a business, it is based on us as human beings. And human beings have fears. We have fear of failing. We have fear of the unknown. We have fear of succeeding. We have, there's a mentor of mine, his name's Steve Pavlina, and he says, everybody wants to be a millionaire. Why isn't everybody? Because they have a fear unconsciously that when they reach that level of financial success, everything around them is going to change. Their tax bracket, their neighborhood, their friendships, their responsibilities, and they don't even realize they're scared of all those changes that are going to happen, that they continue to sabotage themselves. So if you find that you're in that space of not really fully committing, you're still in that part of wanting to try and you think you should, start asking yourself, what am I scared of? And then what are my limiting beliefs? Limiting beliefs, our belief systems drive everything we do. Very quickly, imagine there are 4 boxes here. Belief systems, potential, action, results. The level of your belief system determines the potential that you're going to tap into. So if you have a limiting belief system, I can't because I don't know, I don't understand, are you going to tap into more or less potential? Less potential. Are you going to take more or less action? Less. Are you going to get better or worse results? And what's that going to do to your belief system that you had about the limitation? It's going to reinforce it. And you create a downward cycle that takes you tapping into less potential, less action, worse results. But if you shift that belief to where you can say, you know what, I may not have the education, but I can learn anything when I put my mind to it, you're going to tap into more or less potential. More. Take more or less action. Get better or worse results, which reinforces the belief that you can do it if you get the education. Fears, limiting belief systems are the only 2 things that are going to prevent you from getting from one phase to the next and achieving any transformation that you would like to achieve. Now that Fred's up here, I'm going to presume that I am pretty much wrapped up on my time. One thing I'd like to ask you is on the tables there are suggestion forms. Filling out what you liked from this, what you gained, some extra things you'd like some extra information on. And also, with Fred's permission, when I do these presentations, what I do is I offer a complimentary strategy session to anybody who'd like one, where we can either further talk about the anatomy of transformation, or if there's an area of your business that you'd like some feedback on. These sessions normally $1,500, but when I do a presentation like this, it's complimentary. So just let me know on that feedback form, and I'll be sitting back there and collect them. Fred, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.